thì khi nó sinh dữ chế á tại tôi muốn gì ở xí nữa nó nói á mà chạy bà mà gì cho chơi rồi rong say anh chỉ một sự phát từ nó chế mà lên mất thay cho bây giờ là sai nè nó cháu khô rồi lại cũng nó cần gạo áo tết chờ nó mà này chỉ dùng gì đấy nữa nó chặt ra đây thì nó sinh dữ đôi gì mong nó tự nó chế tới này tao mò lao cản cho chống là đâu bây mình nhiều suy nó rồng xa nó nhau rồng rồi mẹ cho này cho ti cho cứ cho ti cho con cho như rồi mẹ chồng của khang của trong YouTube ha là rồng xa rồi mẹ cho lên cho chụp bé giờ suy chồng một sai cho trắng cho dạng luôn nó nữa ít tôi cho nó là để mong chạy bá mong sai cho chơi rồng sai em mong sai cho Abraham Lincoln Memorial Jefferson Memorial em mong sai số ra cho rồng nữa đó chế mà rong rong chết chết mà thế rồi lúc chạy này chỉ tao lùi xuống nó để có trẻ ô vào chế ok rong
ê tới đi bố mà khét cả trông
rồi cái chuyện mà chế lão cả sẽ sang rồi xưa lúc chạy nằm lần đầu tôi tao rèn tạm phải chờ hai trẻ môn lý sư nó cái một sai lần chưa
bố giờ mà chạy
bà một sai tới chờ là
mà xe vợ
nó
xe
cái là
tăng
nhà
đi
coi lông mẹ luôn
nó hiểu
xin phép ta tạo một chạy bà một sai luôn đồng nó cho này nó kịp nó đó
Now, ordinarily, this is a 15-stop on-off tour. However, stop 14 is closed to us for the duration of the holiday season. It's an easy walk from the Welcome Center, 1 block up E Street, or 10th Street, and 1 block over on F. Our next stop will be stop number 2 for the White House Visitor Center, as well as the Treasury Department. Now, if y'all have any questions whatsoever as we're running around, just holler out my name and I will try to give you the most honest answer this Irishman can dig up. Although, do please take it easy.
đâu phải trong cửu
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, if you take a look on the right, you will see
là bây giờ đang tạo một tàu White House
now down at the far corner.
Kennedy
It started off as the Earl Theater, but in 47 was purchased by the Warner Brothers of Hollywood fame. You'll notice down on the sidewalk these small manhole covers with the stars on them. This is Washington, D.C.'s very own Walk of Fame. We have Whoopi Goldberg, D.C.'s very own comedian Dave Chappelle, as well as Frank Sinatra, who played his final visit here in 1992, the year before he passed away. Now, this actually started off as a vaudeville and silent movie theater house. There are plenty of theaters across D.C., including in front of us on the right. You can see that banner out front. That is the National Theater. These theaters were built to try to showcase Washington, D.C. as a cultural center for the United States. Now, the National Theater, that is where Abraham Lincoln wanted to go and see a drama on the night he was shot. Primarily used for Broadway shows, as this is a much smaller venue, therefore a lot more economical to give a start to a Broadway show, including in 1957 when West Side Story actually premiered here on our very own theater. Now this particular theater, the National, was actually burnt down
Nó phải
5
chống
times
cự lại
and
hơn
5 times rebuilt in the exact same location. Now each time it burnt down was because the tapestries were hung too close to the oil lamps. So not only did this theater showcases as a cultural center across the United States, it also clearly shows how quickly we Washingtonians learn from our mistakes. Now across the street on the left is the newest memorial here in Washington, D.C. This will be the World War I memorial, and you can see the black and white photographs across the back wall. These were selected from some 8,000 different photographs that the artist took, having his models pose so that all emotion and motion was contiguous from left to right. It represents a soldier's journey. Now the sculptures are just about finished, and they'll be ready for installation by the end of 2024. Now in that sculpture, the very first item that you will see is a young girl handing the helmet off to her father as he goes off to war. Goes through many different battle scenes, and finally the triumphant yet somber return back home, where the daughter looks down into the helmet as her father hands it back to her, and the only thing the young lady can see is World War II. All right, we're coming up on stop number 2 for the White House directly in front of us. The Treasury Department in front of us on the right, as well as the Welcome Center, Visitor Center for the White House, which you will see across the street on our left in the center of that huge building. All right, watch your step on the way out, sir. Watch your step. Have a wonderful morning.
Lại hơn em thằng
All right, across the street on the right is the Treasury building. Now that is actually where the Secret Service got its start from, actually during the Civil War, trying to stop forgery on our American currency. In fact, the Treasury building is developed our unilateral money across the United States. As part of its Treasury itself, money was produced from individual banks and was hard to transfer from state to state.
cái nhân tập ban của người ta lấy dòng lô cái xong tập là tôi nó làm tập nó có nó làm lòng thay cho tập bàn sẽ
Now it's difficult to get into the White House to visit, as you must go to your senator or your House rep and ask for a pass. This takes anywhere between 3 weeks and 3 months, which is why we have the White House Visitor Center, where you will find a wonderful virtual tour of the White House. On our right, William Tecumseh Sherman. He was actually chosen to be the leader of our armies during the Civil War, and he refused his position, saying that he did not want to go to task against his brothers in Virginia. So he took the number 2 side, right below.
để trong là cái ngoại sau nó
Now he's famous for his Washington seat, where he took 60,000 some troops through the Carolinas and into Savannah, Georgia. Now it was a burnt earth policy that he was trying to demoralize both the southern community as well as the Confederate Army. And in an attempt to shorten the Civil War, he would come into your city demanding supplies, and if you showed the least bit of resistance, he would burn your property to the ground and took what he wanted anyway. That is except for Savannah, where he left it untouched. Now, many people have rumored that it was because he had a girlfriend there, and that is not the case. The fact of the matter is, Savannah was a major warehouse and shipping port for the southern population, and he was able to take it intact and give it to President Lincoln for an early Christmas present.
Trong gốc rú luôn rồi mà tạm bạc tê là tê là sắp cho sai giờ cho sai tê là sẽ tê tiêu rồng phát tàu
Cái màu thổ nó luôn sẽ tàn đi xí
That is a brief representation of LaFont's plans for Washington, D.C. And then on our right, the second largest municipal building here in Washington, D.C. This is the Ronald Reagan National Trade Center. Now we all remember that Reagan's platform was for that of a smaller government. And still, not even 2 months after the man passed away, they found a way to slap his name on the largest building they could get their hands on. Now, this building across the street on the right is the old post office pavilion, and you will notice Benjamin Franklin's statue made out of it. He was our first Postmaster General here in the United States. Now, this was the Trump Hotel, but he sold his lease to the
Trump Hotel.
Now, this building was built before we had height restrictions here in Washington, D.C. Standing at 315 feet tall, that bell tower has the second highest viewing position in the nation's capital at 270 feet. I'm getting a lot of feedback on my mic up here. If we could just lower the volume out here, please. Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm going to be doing this all day long, and my voice is not going to overpower yours whatsoever.
Thanks, sir.
Absolutely. Now, you can visit Washington Monument by traveling down 12th Street and coming in through the back of this lovely, lovely lobby. Now, if you don't like stairs, no fear. It is a glass elevator that will take you all the way up to that viewing platform. Now, this is operated by the Parks Department, so it is open daily from 9 until 4:30. Now, across the street on the left, you see that sand-colored building. That is the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the J. Edgar Hoover building. He was the director of our FBI for 48 years, and yet never stepped foot in his own building. He kept his office across the street on the Department of Justice, because viewing this building, he said, and I quote, "That is the ugliest blanking building I've ever seen. I'm not moving." So he stayed here at the DOJ where he would harass President Kennedy. So Kennedy had the Secret Service search this building before he visited his brother, making sure that there was not a Hoover sighting so he could enter without being harassed. Now this brings us to stop 3 for the archives. Inside the archives you will find all of our original documents from the Magna Carta to current days, as well as the Navy Memorial across the street on our left. Now you'll notice I was visiting with a friend, and a friend said, if we were to build a tribute to you, what would you like it to be? His response was simple. He pointed to his desk and he said, a simple slab of stone about this size, and simply write on it, "Here lies." Now on our left, the Navy Memorial. Now inside that fountain you will find the Granite Sea. The Granite Sea being the largest map of the world in the entire world.
một chỉ thôi đâu có lấy tiền nhà thì sao lại một mà Ahí tomo chai lu bạn ai một
But
thùng
it's
mà
my understanding that
từng
every
thầy
fall,
ơi
from
yo
the
lo cái tổ là
midshipman
đã
play
chuột
like
chuột
Bonnie
nhang là
Cadets,
rồi
that the
yo lấy
skinny
ha
little brats change
cái
to
cái chai
read,
mà
go
lần đầu
read,
lúc xong cái
be
sáng
on.
về là tao ăn một chai là tao
Now we also have the blessing of the fleet here every spring. This is a tradition that started in the
có mong
1400s.
trong
Ours is a little
trong
different.
sự chim
As
có
we
phe
gather the
thế
water from the seven
sự
seas
thôn này
as
nó
well
thì
as the
để
great
luôn
lakes,
bạn
and
mà
before the jets are turned on in that fountain,
để cả
we
tờ
do
nó
something
tờ
called
lên
salting of the waters,
mình bảo
where
nó
we
tim thay
add
rồi
these
chờ thuốc
waters
và nó ăn được
and say a blessing over the fountain, thereby blessing the seas or wherever our mariners may travel. But I don't recall in my history books what he actually accomplished. He was a DC soldier, that much I know, but I don't believe he rose past the ranks of colonel. Federal Trade Commission on our right, their only job to protect us from unwise business practices, which is why this equine statue on our right will be the only statue you will find of an unruly horse on my tour. That is actually their mission statement in sculpture. That is man controlling trade. Now behind that building, you will also find the west building of the Gallery of Art. Inside this museum, you will find works of art from the 11th through the 19th century, to include the only Da Vinci to be found in the Americas. Now that museum got its start by the man with the name of pardon me, Mellon. And you'll find the Mellon Memorial Fountain directly out front. He actually gave up most of his own personal art collection to get this museum off the ground. Now to the left, you will find the closest embassy to the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. That is the Canadian Embassy. And its closeness represents the bond we have with our nearest neighbor and dearest ally. Now you can get from the West Building of Art over to the East Building Gallery of Art by use of an underground concourse. Now in this concourse you will find a wonderful cafeteria, gift shop, restaurants, as well as a bookstore selling just about every type of art you can imagine. Now you'll notice out in front of the East Building as we go by some examples of what you might find. This museum is also the only museum on my tour that has a rooftop terrace. Now you'll
cái
find
ghê
the crazy
ghê
rooster
rất
up
là
on the
đầu
roof.
đó
This is a
Yeah,
wonderful
yeah,
place to
that's
sit
the
beside your sculpture garden and enjoy the fresh air.
cái tour trong học hàng the cái tour từ
And then
trong
my
các cái
favorite
cho
sculpture right
là
here,
thì
actually hidden behind the
mong
building.
on a local
Now I got off my
bang
trolley
America
during
này và
training
tàu
and
sẵn
trying
sàng
to read
America
the placard so I
cái
could
tour
tell
nhân
you
từ lúc
what
ta
it's
là không
called.
có không
I
phải là
am
tiền
paid
đến
and
việc
taught
chơi
for
tí
a
này
living, and yet cannot pronounce what's on that placard on the ground. So I gave it my own title. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Triceratops satellite dish. In front of us, the Capitol building. This is the west face. Now, every president before Ronald Reagan had their inauguration on the east side, but he insisted on facing his constituents in California when he was sworn in. Now, since that time, every president has taken the oath on the west face of the Capitol. Now, the original Capitol was just that center section, the nice tan-colored building. But as our nation grew, so did our government. So we added that east wing for the Senate and the right wing on for the House, as well as a new dome, as the original dome was much smaller. It was actually wood framed and clad in copper, and it wasn't aging well anyway. So they built that beautiful cast iron dome and brought it up to the roof, a piece at a time, and bolted it together in place. Now I do have to warn you, right about here is where my bad dad jokes really get started. And it's with the Frances Perkins building.
อยากจะ
She
ไป
was
อัน
the
ย่าง
first
หมอ
woman
ตี
to be selected for a presidential cabinet position. She was the Secretary of Labor for 12 years. Now this building was named in her honor by a unanimous vote of all of the employees on the 100th anniversary of her birthday. Now I sat and practiced my script with my wife. And when I told her that Frances Perkins was the only woman I know that was in labor for 12 years, she threw a frozen chicken at me. So I promised I would rewrite it a bit. Now I do make the statement Frances Perkins was indeed the Secretary of Labor for 12 years. And throughout all of her work, she gave birth to some great things. She gave birth to the 40-hour work week. She gave birth to unemployment insurance, as well as the Social Security benefits we all hope to enjoy at the end of our careers. She also worked tirelessly against child labor and protecting the impoverished immigrant women that were so poorly abused in our sweatshops across the United States. To the point that after graduating Mount Holyoke College, she was known throughout Philadelphia to be standing on the street corners crying out about these injustices. Finally, she witnessed the shirtwaist factory fire in New York, where 147 people lost their lives. Most of these, the immigrant women she was trying to protect. Her screams of outrage got the attention of the Roosevelts. And husband and wife sat at night talking for days on end about the attributes of this fine woman, finally come to the conclusion that she was the only true fit for the cabinet
ขอเรา
position.
ลงรถขอเราลงรถขออะไรลงรถ
I will
Oh,
come
yeah,
in
go,
to
Leo.
stop form. This is for the Hyatt Regency, as well as the Japanese American Memorial to patrons during World War II. So I heard Australia back there. Where are the rest of y'all from? We've got some distance travelers here today.
California back here.
All righty. And we have tours in San Diego too, sir.
Yeah.
Now, why would you leave that lovely weather in California to come here?
I know.
I will make this right on Jersey Avenue. And I'd like to point out the fire station that'll be across the street on your left. Built in 1960, its responsibilities were to protect Capitol Hill. But this also has a museum inside where you can find the apparatus of the fire department from days gone by. Now, back in the early days of the fire department, they were actually referred to as drunk gangs, as they spent most of their time in clubhouses just partying away. Now, still, they would have battles with their two main pumps and try to break through to be the first
ออกเตียน
to
แต่ลูก
respond
ไป
to
โด
a
น
fire
นะ
near the city. Now, on the right is the backside of the Japanese American Memorial. Not a lot to see, but I like to get an early jump as there's so much to talk about this when I come past the front. You'll notice those two beautiful cranes together in the near corner of that fountain. Those cranes are wrapped in barbed wire. Now, in the Japanese culture, two cranes together represent happiness and longevity, and the barbed wire is a representation of what we as a nation did to our very own citizens, imprisoning them for the duration during World War II, and without representation or even a simple trial. On our right, the Senate Fountain and Garden, a very popular backdrop. On our local news agencies, as well as during the weekend, you will almost always find it covered with wedding parties taking photographs. Now this is going to bring us into stop number 5. Stop number 5 is for Union Station. The largest train station here in the United States. It is now number 2 behind Grand Central in New York. Inside Union Station, you will find our subway system, and you can travel around the city and explore on your own. You will also find Amtrak, Greyhound, and several other modes of transportation that'll get you across the city, as well as this fine nation of ours. Now, on the lower level, you will find a massive food court, as well as shopping on both levels throughout the entire building. Now, coming around the front of this beautiful Romanesque train station is Columbus Circle, and you will find Christopher Columbus in the center of the statuary inside the circle, standing on the prow of one of his own ships. That old man crouching down to his right, he represents the old world, which is England. And of course, on the other side, you will find a young Native American in much the same pose. She represents the New World, the Americas. Now, around the front of Columbus Circle, you can see all of these flags. There is a flag for each state as well as territory of the United States. And they all have a ball on top, save for one. And that would be the last flag in the first set of 5. On top of that flagpole, you will find a cross. Now that is the state flag for Maryland, and Maryland was established as a safe haven for those who wish to practice the Catholic religion. This is the Thurgood Marshall Federal Judiciary Building on our right. Thurgood was our first African-American Supreme Court justice here in the United States, trying 32 cases, winning 29 of them. Likely the most important being Brown versus the Board of Education, where he put an end to segregation in our public schools. All right, this is stop 5 for Union Station. Now, at peak, more than 200,000 people travel through this train station.
Yeah, little train
Now, the
station
lane
này.
that sits here is actually called Swamp Poodle.
Tôi cây được train subway nha.
The Irish fled during the Potato Famine, and those that arrived here settled on this land.
Cái chế mà
8
tôi
blocks by
lường
about
rồi
8 blocks. And when asked what they
khó
thought
là
of this
nó khó
area,
là thì nó ngay
they
ở
told the
vấn đề
reporter that it was swampy and that there were
như
puddles
sao để
all
bao
over the
từ
place. The reporter, not understanding the Irish brogue, wrote down what he heard, and to this day, this area is still referred to as Swamp Poodle. Now, on our right, we have the Postal Museum. Now, it's sitting where our original Washington Senators baseball field was in the late 1700s. It is now home to the largest stamp collection in the world, as well as containing every apparatus ever used to deliver the mail in the United States. From aircraft all the way down to the simple leather satchels that they carried over their shoulders. Stop 5, code 4, rarest stamps in the world. And that will be the upside down Jenny. Now this stamp is a commemorative stamp for the first Army airmail flight that left Washington, D.C. into Philadelphia. Another one from Philly to New York, and then returning. Now the tail number that is on that stamp, there was 100 of them printed, has the aircraft upside down, and that tail number is the same one flown by a young Army
thì
lieutenant
lúc
by
ở
the name
rong
of
lại đó thì
George.
mày nhỏ luôn là
On his first
bắt
trip
nó
to
chỉ muốn mua cho nó
Philadelphia,
cắn lòng
he circled
trên
the
cái lòng
airfield
gầu
a couple
nè
of times for dramatic
giờ sao
effect.
nhau không mà
Because the
không có
president was
hiểu
watching,
thật đó
and went north to
không có
Philadelphia by
là
flying
luôn
directly south and crashing his aircraft in Walworth, Maryland. Now, of course, the man didn't go through, but on the second day, everything went off without a hitch. But the young lieutenant wasn't among the pilots. On the third day, likely because he was engaged to the daughter of a very powerful man, he got the tap again. This time, the Army, being smart, had a second pilot fly parallel to him for the first few miles, and told him as long as he kept the Chesapeake over his right, he could not miss Philadelphia. So after the second pilot peeled away, he kept looking out of his cockpit, going, Chesapeake is there, I'm okay. All the way around the Chesapeake Bay, and as far south one more time as it could go before it became the Atlantic in Virginia. Now he safely landed his aircraft, refueled, and got directions from a local farmer. Finally making it to Philadelphia, where once again he crashed his aircraft. Now he went down in the history books with the nickname Wrong Way Boy, and makes me wonder whether that first set of 100 stamps was truly a mistake, or just another
Tên gì mà
stick
chỉ được
and it
sai cha
happens to young cadet.
bằng chê cứ nói chuyện nhau
Now once
cái
again, the
buồn
cat will
nó
go in front of us and
đã
you'll
quên
notice
gì
a
đã
lady
luôn khắp
freedom
trong đâu đây
standing
nó
proudly on top. She is the tallest statue here in Washington, D.C., standing 19 feet and 6 inches tall. Now, it's an unwritten rule here in the nation's capital, but it has been adhered to, that nothing in the city will ever stand taller than freedom herself. As we drive around it, you'll get several different views of it. You can see exactly what I'm talking about. This is the backside, so it was more or less impressive than the front. Now here on our right, one more time, the Japanese-American Memorial. The first thing you'll notice are the 5 boulders in the center. There is a boulder for each generation held in our internment camps. Those camps in broad print on the back wall, and the state in which they were located in the Midwest. Now the number below the names is the count of American citizens held there after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The advisors had convinced the president that any Japanese Americans still left in this country after the bombing had to be spies. So they sent the military out and gathered up everybody. Now they didn't get a trial nor notice, and were allowed to carry only what fit in their own 2 hands on the way to these internment camps. Now, while all of this was going on, there was a list in fine print on that back wall. These are the Japanese American heroes that joined our military while their families were incarcerated. Now, one of the units that was formed by these heroes was the 442nd, also known as the Purple Heart Brigade, as they garnered tens of thousands of individual awards from the
Được
Purple
phải trong
Heart
thực tại đây
all
là
the way
chẳng
to
hạn.
the Medal of Valor. They became the highest decorated military unit in U.S. history in accordance with their size and their time at battle. Now, over your left shoulder, the Taft Memorial for Senator Taft, known here in Washington City as Mr. Republican. But in that bell tower, there's also 27 bells, and this likely a nod to his father, our 27th president. Now we're going to roll in here to stop number 6. This is from the Capitol building one more time, as well as the United States Botanic Garden. Now the largest bell in that bell tower weighs in at 7 tons, the same weight as your average African elephant. And it was actually hoisted up to the top of that bell tower manually with the use of old and rope. Now you'll notice the statuary in the center of this circle. This is the Peace Memorial. And the two young ladies at the top would be History and Greek. Greek crime on a history shoulder. And all history's tablet is simply engraved. They died so that our country might live.
Rưu
This
nhỏ tạo đi
memorial
bê
is for
tổ
those who
để
we lost at
con
sea
dê là
during
nhà
the
mình
Civil
mưu
War.
ra để được.
Right, if you'd like to visit the Capitol building, it is straight up the stairs to your right.
See you on the next one.
Yes, ma'am. And then the United States Botanic Garden is directly behind us, one block. On your left, as well as the Senate Christmas tree. And then on our right will be Ulysses S. Grant, the general of our armies for the Civil War. Now, Ulysses S. Grant is the only equine statue on my tour that does not face the White House. You'll notice he's facing his commander-in-chief with Lincoln's Memorial at the far end of the mall on our right.
Lu bên chân trái lu tê lu chu nó mà. Đi kia lu đấy mà lu cái tay.
And then on
Yeah.
our left, James Garfield, the second president to be assassinated in the United States. However, the bullet had nothing to do with his death. It was actually more than a dozen surgeons sticking their fingers in the wound. And this was prior to antiseptic or washing of hands was a widely used practice. It was the infection that took the young man's life. On our
Thay
left,
chỉ thay nó
the
tiền.
United States Botanic Garden.
Chỉ thay mà vì chỉ nó tiền.
Có
chỉ tí nó tiền.
Dozens of rooms, all
Đây có
trying
chiều
to
xe.
control to match the environment where these plants and
Có
flora
chỉ
came
tí
from.
cái sao thì nó ha.
Now inside ours we have a plant that's called the corpse flower.
Picture.
Ordinarily the corpse flower will bloom once every 3 or 4 years. Ours has been quite
Lu tê
hyperactive.
lu chu này nó luôn
Now
có.
when it does, people line up all the way around this massive block for a momentary sniff of a blossom that's about as tall as I am and stinks of rotten carrion. I can understand the first time, I still haven't reconciled with
Nhà
myself
ta
the
chỉ nói nhỏ có
second.
khé thế cho nó cứ lùm luôn.
Now, this beautiful
shame.
building in front of us on the right, if you take note of the odd shape and texture, that's the National Museum of the American Indian, And it was built that way to represent the mesas, canyons, and plateaus in which our American Indians lived. It's a beautiful building. Now inside it is all sectioned off to represent the several different areas where the American Indians lived in the entire Americas. From Canada down to South America. Also has a cafeteria that was written up by no less than Rachel Ray. It's a must try in our Smithsonian's. Now you'll notice all of the large boulders around the building. These are called the old grandfathers, as the American Indian was a very spiritual people. They believed that they lived as one with the world around them, to the point that when they hunted for food, they made sure to use every possible item from that animal so as not to insult the spirit of that animal, thereby condemning their very own spirit. Now across the street on the right is one of our most popular museums. That is the Air and Space Museum, one of two that I remember from my childhood. Now, it is a Smithsonian, so it's free, but you do need to secure yourself a time for entry. So if you would like to visit this museum, kindly get on your phone and obtain a time entry ticket. Now, I remember this museum from my childhood because I got to sit in this cockpit of a 707 and pretend I was Snoopy fighting off the red bear. Now that cockpit's still there, but right next to it is the cockpit of a 767, absolutely dwarfing my memory of the original exhibit. And then on our left, the Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial. I like to point out that beautiful tapestry hanging at the back of the memorial during World War II. Now that tapestry is comprised of over 300 miles of stainless steel cable that is tied together with the use of
Tôi nên ghê hay.
Ở museum có lẽ họ làm
Hả?
at the museum.
At the museum?
Now my favorite museum on my loop is across the street on the right. This is the Hirshhorn Museum of Modern Art. I do not know who the executives of this museum are, but they're absolutely brilliant, as these are the most well laid out exhibits throughout that wonderful museum. On our left, the Wilbur Wright
Số
Building.
IHE là
On
thâu
our
chứ.
right, the Orville Wright Building. Now, Wilbur's people are responsible for making sure we're provided with the safest possible air and in this generation, space travel. While Orville's folks are here to make sure that our airports are current and safe, as well as research and development into lands for future airports and growth. Now, we all know that Orville Wright went into the history books as the very first man to accomplish powered flight. But did you know the only reason why Orville is in our history books is because he actually lost a bet with his brother Wilbur.
Chứ cả phố Long Tê thì lúc nào
Took the
chúng còn
first
già.
flight, which just happened to fail.
Cái đấy mình ready
A
lên
couple
trên.
of mild
Đây là Long Tê
adjustments,
thì
and
bố số
Orville was
lũ
able
thâu
to
thì
maintain
thâu
flight
là
for
chẳng
a
hay.
short distance.
Thế thì
Not only that, the Wright brothers
Number
were the
13,
very
right?
first to sell aircraft to the
Con này
military.
213.
Yeah,
They
number
all wanted their
13.
planes out to an
Nó sẽ
army
phải long
field
về
that were
để
certain
cho lên.
in showing off its maneuverability
Number
and
13
overall
sẽ rất là mà
when suddenly
về
the
tên Long Tê
plane
thì
snapped off and the airplane crashed to the ground. The army, ever responsible, looked at the Wright brothers in the eye and said the only thing that made sense. They said, "Gentlemen, we want 5." Now we are heading in to the wharf, the oldest open-air fish market in the United States. There's a mile and a half waterfront walkway, absolutely spectacular. You'll see plenty of boats, oftentimes boat parades, as well as passing by more than 45 different restaurants, cafes, and shops here at the wharf. This is also where you will find the water taxi. Now, this water taxi will take you into Alexandria. It'll take you into National Harbor, and it will take you to Georgetown. Georgetown, one of our most exciting night spots here in the city. Now, there's also plenty of activities here, such as the karaoke shop right in front of us. There's family swings, boat rentals. Now, there's also a restaurant, I believe it's called Allison's, and if you've never had it, just know how to properly clean a crab. Do not fear. Simply place it on the table in front of you. Put a confused look on your brow, and at least 18 total strangers will jump to your table to show you the right way to get it done.
这种那种肉骨，这么种吃上啊，这看不着了，上皮脑了，还有
Hindi mong lamang kaya naman 30.
Alright, this is stop number 8 for the wharf. If you'd like to
Number 8.
visit, hop off my trolley and cross across the street to our left. Stop 8 code. Now this is not a free museum. It's about $30 for an adult and somewhere around 20 for a child. However, nobody has ever gotten on my trolley at the end of the day after visiting this museum and had anything less than oh wow to say about it. Now this museum is actually operated by those from the world of espionage. And you start off on the very top floor, where you will be given a mission, a secret identity, as well as a cover story. Now you'll run through this museum using the apparatus from the days of espionage, past to present. Finally making your way down to the lobby. If you don't get snatched by one of these agents and interrogated where they will try to break your cover story. Now once you do make it down, you will find out whether you want to be the next world super spy or just another wannabe Maxwell Smart. And you can see the spy museum in front of us on the right, beautiful building with the red girders. Now inside the corner window, you're going to see what looks like a large brown Easter egg. That is actually a one-man pedal-powered sub used during the Revolutionary War. And on the left of the front door, you will see the Aston Martin that was driven by James Bond in the movie Goldfinger. And this is stop number 9. Next stop is stop 10. This will be for the very first Smithsonian Museum. You'll see that coming into view at the bottom of the street. That is the Smithsonian Castle. Now to its right, we have the Museum of African Art, and to its left, we have the Sackler Museum of Asian Art. Now both of these museums are absolutely fantastic and much larger than they appear as they go several stories down into the ground. Now the Smithsonian, unfortunately, is closed to us for the next 4 years as it's going through some renovations. However, the walk around it is absolutely spectacular. Look at the buildings, gardens. Also from stop 10, you can visit the Washington Monument. You can see it in front of us on the right. Simply hop off my trolley, walk to that red brick building at the end of the road, and turn right. Trust me, you cannot miss it. And then, of course, the Holocaust Museum, a very somber yet very important museum. Same red brick building, it'll be the museum that's its neighbor on the left. Now these buildings we're driving between, this is the Department of Agriculture. The folks working here on our left are to make sure that we are provided with the safest, freshest meat, fish, and poultry. While those on our right are our granaries, including developing lands across the United States for future farms. And then of course that beautiful red brick building in front of us, the Department of Forestry. Now they have the longest running PSA here in the United States with only you can prevent forest fires. And we all know the spokesperson, Smokey Bear. But for the first year, and the first year only, there was a different spokesperson. Anybody care to try to guess who that was? When I tell you, you'll go, of course. But it was Walt Disney's very own Bambi. That it was not a man, that was a Now we're going to make this next left on Raoul Walker Place. But this man was so heroic. He was a Swede diplomat who spent his own fortune buying up old hotels and boarding houses. He placed Swede flags on these, turning them into mini embassies in Germany. Now it's often rumored that that number may be as high as 100,000. But Mr. Wallenberg wasn't done yet. He was also known throughout Hungary, running across the top of trains, slipping passports inside the open windows in an attempt to save the fleeing Jews. The entire time on top of these trains, taking gunfire from the German army as he scurried down the train. And it's a very fitting place for Wallenberg Place as it comes to the backside of the Holocaust Museum.
一部分这若去我是大妈。
and watershed, as most of this city was at or just above sea level.
包大部分这上巴布路
Every
呢？
time the Potomac rose with the
Huh?
tide, the city would flood one more time. So they spent an inordinate amount of time dredging the Potomac and piling this soil back up on top. Unfortunately, once I said before, we don't learn quickly from our mistakes. They never planted seed. And the next big storm that came through the city would take all of that labor and wash it right back down into the Potomac. Now we're coming up to the back side of the Holocaust Museum, likely to be the most powerful museum here on my tour. As we all can understand that history forgotten is history doomed to repeat. You'll also notice these two pieces of statuary behind the museum. One's an upside down house and the other a tree trying to regrow. Those are loss and regeneration. And they're actually a memorial to the 1.5 million children put to death by the Nazis. Now with those children, it would bring the total of over 6 million people. Just about 2/3 of the overall Jewish community across Europe lost their lives during the Holocaust. The hero of engraving and printing. This is where all of our paper money is printed in the United States. 600 million bills printed per day, 6 days a week. And you can see the 3 sets of doors, 2 with signs on them, 1 without. You take your passport to that door without anything on it and ring the bell once a year, and they will allow you to select a bill, the denomination of your choice. So if you're in town next February 31st, bring your passport by. Now, once again, as I was saying, the Potomac would constantly flood and come across the city every high tide. So the Corps of Army Engineers built this tidal basin on our right. It's 10 feet deep all the way across, and yet at high tide holds more than 200 million gallons of water. 2 times during the day brings that total close to 500 million gallons of water. And while this did a wonderful job slowing down the flooding of our city,
Thomas
it
Jefferson
also had a second purpose.
Thomas
As
Jefferson
Constitution Avenue
Memorial
was the Washington
từ
Canal
quý nhất chúng ta
started
là
in
cái chiều
1810.
ra
And this canal was dug 3 feet deep. So they would use this water to wash through the canal to flush out the sediment and debris that had settled at the bottom of the slow-running canal during the course of the day. Now on our right, the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. I refer to him as our 1, 2, 3 politician because he was our first Secretary of State, our second Vice President, and 3rd President of the United States. Now, he was also the primary author in our original documents, the Declaration and Constitution. However, his early verbiage was so close to the Constitution of Virginia, written by this man with his memorial on our left, George Mason. George Mason, one of our forgotten founding fathers. And not because he wasn't active, but because he refused to sign our documents, as he believed in a large state government, and our documents provided for a large central. Now, coming across this bridge on our right, you'll have a beautiful photo opportunity
太到 right နော်
for the Washington Monument,
太到
as
မကလို့
well as
ทำหรอ
the
ตีอ่ะ
Jefferson Memorial reflecting across the tidal basin. And then on our left, that building with all the windows on the opposite side of that bridge, that is the largest federal building here in
Thomas
Washington
Jefferson
City. That is the
thì thằng này là
Pentagon.
nhau dễ dễ rất là mà
Now, while I understand that everything on that side of the Potomac is Virginia, the Pentagon is the only building in Virginia that carries a Washington, D.C. address and zip code. And to the right of the Pentagon, those 3 beautiful spires arcing into the air, that is the Air
sao thì
Force
nó phải được còn
Memorial.
nó sao thì nó
ที่ Air Force มันไม่ออก
nhau
Spires
đồ luôn sáng mình nhẹ
represent the
nhẹ
bomb burst formation. This
Kaya ang
formation
kaya
will be
tiin.
formed by 4 aircraft. I like to believe it's only 3 spires.
หนูช่วยไปเจอนาทีบ้ามันรู้
And then once again, across the Potomac at 10 o'clock on top of the hill, you'll see that pinkish mountain. That is the Lee Custis House. And you can visit there by joining us on our Arlington Memorial Cemetery tour, as we are the only company authorized by the military to provide tours at the cemetery. You can also visit the Eternal Flame, where President Kennedy has been laid to rest, as well as view a very crisp military ceremony, the changing of the guard. And we're coming into stop number 12, where in my opinion,
Number 12
two of the
day, number
greatest
13
men
day,
in
yeah.
American history have their memorial. I showed you early on my tour a very small memorial to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This one's a little bit bigger at 7.5 acres. 4 different rooms, each room representing one of his terms as president. It is also the only place that you will see a tribute to a First Lady, as Miss Eleanor stands watch over her husband's Ford Limousine. And then in front of us on the right, the memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. himself.
Agreed. The Roosevelt is amazing.
It is gorgeous.
I walked through it at night.
Yeah.
And it was so moving. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, it was
Really
very,
good job.
yeah, very interesting. I like the fact that they're all water features. And the use of all of that granite to represent the fading of our country, the destruction of the world during the war, and then the rebuilding of everything in the background.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s memorial is another one of my favorites. Now the
Number
artist
13 or number 12.
that did this memorial
The
took
number
one of his
13 ये का अंक है
speeches,
कि
took an excerpt out of it. This speech being, "From a mountain of despair comes a stone of hope." And you'll see the mountain right here on the left, and the stone of hope carved from
Nói
the
Martin Luther King đúng là
That stone of hope is
Martin
the
Luther
likeness
King,
of Martin Luther King himself. Now, the artist believed, as many of us around the world would agree, that Martin Luther King was taken from us long before he could accomplish his life's goals. So when he carved the likeness of King, he stopped at mid-chin. So those who visit that memorial can reflect on these thoughts, as well as others invoked from that
có
memorial.
thể tôi mua tôi này này chỉ bà
And we're coming into stop 13. This is where
Yeah.
we'll catch our
Huh?
Arlington Memorial Shuffle. Visit the Lincoln Memorial, the Vietnam
Tôi này
Memorial,
này
as well as the
Lincoln Memorial.
Korean Memorial here on our right. Now you'll notice the large black wall. That is the back
Ano,
side of the
kawa,
Korean
yeah.
Memorial. And that is the wall of remembrance.
Việt Nam
Now on that wall, like David Walsh,
Yeah.
you'll find the names of everyone who perished during the Korean conflict.
có
What you will
hoa
not find is a single insignia or rank, as no soldier lost to us will ever be held any more important than that of the soldier standing by his side. And then you can see the Lincoln Memorial on our right. Now, 77 years, his Gettysburg Address opener is prevalent here in this
nói
memorial.
Lincoln
As a score is 20 years, that would bring the number to 87, which happens to be the exact count of stairs to get from the bottom of the reflecting bowl up to the top of the Lincoln Memorial. And on that 87th step, you will find a placard. Now, that placard is standing in the exact spot that the great Martin Luther King Jr. stood when he delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. The Vietnam War Memorial, across Lincoln Stairs and on the other side of the reflecting pond, you will find it. Just look for the large American flag. If you are after the Arlington Shuttle, this is where you'll hop off and wait. That shuttle comes around every 30 minutes.
ok tên trên
And it is the same shoveless line, just slightly different. It'll be smaller, and it is blue in color.
ok you want this
bên nào nó sẽ chấp đang nọc học cũng nào thì chụp cái
cái này hả cái này có
Fourth densest city in the United States by day. I mean, a lot of it is our government and our military, of course. But I found that to be impressive. And the more research I did, I found that not only are we the fourth densest, we also have the fourth highest percentage of parkland of cities across the United States, with 24% of our land being dedicated to parkland. Now, of course, these memorials are all sitting on parkland, so it's a little deceiving. Another foreign nationalist right here in front of us. Now, I'm Irish and he's Scottish, but I still hold him in very high regard. This is the great John Paul Jones, our very own privateer. Now, he was at battle against a much superior British ship. When the British captain asked him if he was ready to surrender,
Yes, I don't know
his
what
retort
to
went
say. Yeah.
down into the history books as one of the greatest ever, when I have not yet begun to fight. He actually beat that British ship and then folded it into our Navy, as well as about 40 other ships during his career. Washington Monument on our right. And of course, the World War II Memorial on
Là
our
coi
left. With the
kẹp
Lincoln
để
Memorial at the end of
cho
the
cái
wall.
tới rồi lấy
Beautiful
họ.
sight. Now you'll notice how our newer memorials
Cho
are
nó muốn nó
all
tí để
set
cho nó
down
sang
into
được
the
phải nó
ground. That is
nó
done
chịu
on
để
purpose so as not to block the view across America's front yard, the mall. Now,
Yeah.
you see the curved wall with all of those stars on the back side of the fountain. There are 4,048 stars there, each star representing 100 souls lost to us during World War II. Now, how many people back there remember the B-52's monster hit, the Love Shack? Yep, right here on the left, Washington, D.C.'s very own Love Shack. That is the oldest structure on the Washington Mall. There were 7 of these houses up and down Constitution Avenue, as Constitution Avenue was the Washington Canal. And this was the lockkeeper's house, or one of them. John Hilton, obviously the wrong side of the Hilton family, lived here for 20 years. His job, when the bell tolled, was to come out, raise the lock, lower the gate back down, and collect the toll. If he were busy, his wife would do it. If his wife was indisposed, one of the 14 children living in that 740 square foot house would do it for him. 14 children, 740 square feet. Absolutely a house full of love, or none of them would have survived. There was 11 children in my house growing up, and we don't talk to one another anymore. Now, I like to point out odd things about the city, and I like to point out the military around the city. This one on our left fits the bill for both. That beautiful flaming gold sword, that is the memorial on our left to the 2nd Infantry, one of the strangest army units in our entire military history. Odd, because they were never formed in the United States. They were formed in France during World War II. Odder yet, because they are the only army unit ever to have been led by not just one, but two Marine Corps generals, proving that the 2 different branches can get along if you keep them out of the local books. Now, on our left, the South Lawn in the White House, as well as the celebration of peace, where you can see the National Christmas tree, as well as the National Celebration of Lights. Now, the south side is where most foreign dignitaries are greeted when visiting the United States. And the north side is where most are greeted here for state dinners. However, neither would be the main entrance, as all entrances to the White House are indeed the main entrance. It's done this way so that we do not insult someone with a culture separate from ours. This is also where you would find the Easter egg roll during the spring. Now, Marine One lands here and takes off right course. But back in the early days, the late 1700s and in the early 1800s, this entire yard, the largest part of the presidential park around the White House, was actually the livestock holding area. So this would have all been full of goats, pigs, and sheep. coming up and down Constitution Avenue. This is a great place if you wish to visit our museums. I like to call it Museum Alley because it's starting at this first one on our right with the African American Museum of Culture and History. You can visit most of our museums on both sides of the mall within an 18-minute walk from end to end. Now this museum is absolutely gorgeous, and you'll notice the shape of the facade. That is to represent the crown of an African queen. And that intricate metalwork that's on that facade, that once again is a tribute to our African American slave and freedmen who made up the largest proportion of our early iron workers here in the United States. Now this is another museum that requires a time stamp for entry as it's very popular. Cafeteria here is number one on my list as it has buttermilk chicken good enough to make you question your own grandmother's cooking. Now the next museum down the line is a Museum of American History, where you will find inventions throughout time. The ruby red slippers from the Wizard of Oz, as well as the ball gowns worn from our first ladies throughout history. We also hold the Hope Diamond, and as we all know, whoever holds that diamond has a life full of luck, all of it bad. Then the next museum down past that will be the Museum of Natural History, where you will find fossils, gems, just about everything you can imagine during the history of this world. I kind of refer to it as a taxidermist dream come true. We've got a collection of bird fossils that's absolutely massive, as well as saber-toothed tiger, woolly mammoth, and the T-Rex in there. It's a wonderful museum for children of all ages. Stop 14, code 38. Thank you, MDOT. Building that was filmed for 44 seconds, making that 44 seconds my favorite part of the entire movie. River Creek, eventually all the way over to the C&O Canal in its early years, losing $2 million in construction loss back in its own time. Eventually making its way to the C&O, where it functioned for a little more than a decade longer, before barge work was no longer a problem. Now, eventually, the sides were bricked up, the angled slopes going down into the water, because it was frequent to see the headline, "Man Trapped Strikes Again." With only 3 feet of water, it seems that the locals walking down here would slip on the angled bank down into simple 3 feet of water where they would drown. They kept coming even after they bricked it up, so they finally covered it with bricks and put a road here, Constitution Avenue.
Rồi
Now,
bây giờ
there,
cho
the
tụi con
Washington
quen
Canal
về
is still
để
closed and is
sai
used
lên
as
non
a
sư
storm drain.
phát triển năng đầu hay là chia hai lưu chơi đã có tiếng bài có cho lưu cho được nó thì các con mình kít là chỉ sẵn sàng là bên mà lên suy chào xe về trên bàn mà xe đồng Washington DC này nó đã chơi rong gò thì cái xe để nó sư lúc chạy lên nhung về xe rồi được thành video mà yang tân đây đấy
building is now just a Starbucks. And then my last Irish chuckle, I promise. You see this beautiful fountain on our right with the crane on top. That is the temperance fountain. Now that was the idea of a dentist that came here from San Francisco. And he believed that if he could supply ice cold fountain water to the folks of Washington City, that we would forever put down our booze. We have more bars here in Washington, D.C. than we have churches. And there is indeed a church on almost every street corner. It still is a wonderful tribute to the man and his beliefs, and shows how we here in D.C. are truly a melting pot, and that there is room in this small city